Hey, this is FRJ Tracing on how to take a model of whatever format, even if it's an original SCX model straight from SL. Um, you get into Blender, export, go into Max, and also export that to the game. And so this pipeline should be pretty quick once you have everything set up. And so what you're going to need is Blender. The version doesn't seem to really matter for the plugin. You're going to need the SCX plugin or Invictus plugin from the Discord, the GOM team Discord. You're going to need or you're going to need 3ds Max 5 or anything that's compatible with the Invictus exporting tool, which is so the Blender plugin cannot export. And from what I understand, ZModeler can't export, but it can import as well. So if you have ZModeler, if you're a crazy person, you can use that. And so the only way they get a model into the game is through 3ds Max 5. I also will have a tutorial on how to do bones real quick because that's its own subset of uh, of steps, but this will focus on basic parts or chassis or anything. If it needs to be paintable, it doesn't matter. You're also going to need, or I would recommend Marianne's SCX editor v1.0. You can get that in the Discord. This will be useful for reviewing and double checking. And then also SL Studio or Res Decode or anything, you can open your RPK so that you can access your renders and your texture values, so you know which one is which when you're mapping, especially if you have multiple textures. So yeah, that's everything there. So first, for your Blender environment, assuming you have the plugin set up, you're gonna head on over to your scene, and I set up the honestly the units themselves don't matter. For example, if I'm making a part that's got a lot of US or Imperial units, like a Ford 9-inch or something, you're gonna have Imperial units as a standard across the board. You can use Imperial, or if you have everything else, it can be metric. So the units, it doesn't matter itself, but the unit scale needs to be 0.01 so that when you export, it is 1:1. The next thing you're gonna have to make sure is, in my case, I already have the texture set up, but you're gonna go into your Blender file, and usually I have something that's totally clear of everything. I don't have any cameras, I don't have any extraneous materials or anything like that. So the materials you do see here are from the work I did already. So this is a finished product. What I'm going to show is what it's going to look like when you import it. So you're going to go into your file, import Invictus and chassis. So in this case, reuse materials for sure. You get the textures, and they come in with the textures. If you don't check this box, you'll get the texture mapping, but not the texture itself. So it's like half to one, 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other. It doesn't matter. And then this seems to not really be consequential. It's not like good or bad. So it's just checked anyway. And then with what you have to do anyway to the mesh, it doesn't really matter. It says it's risky, and I don't really see it doing anything productive. So you import from there. You're gonna notice it's like nothing happened. Well, the reason why is when you import an SCX, it's gonna be 100 times smaller. But I know it sounds like it's all roundabout with it's 100 times smaller, so you scale it up, and then you're setting your unit scale to 0.01. But all of this is so that when you export it as a wavefront and you bring it into 3ds Max, 3ds Max will see it as a 1.0, 1:1 thing. So you don't have to do anything else if you set up the scene initially. But this only applies to importing an SCX. If you're working and you have everything set up, you're gonna have to have your scene units as um, the 0.01 regardless, right? So this is just to make sure that when you're importing an SCX, it's within the same unit scale of everything else that you're working on. So anyway, it comes in as teeny tiny, and you're going to scale it up to 100. And as you can see, I brought it in on my 3D cursor, so I actually need to move the whole object. And if I hide my other model that I did work on, it seems like we're pretty good here. We got everything that came in, right? So we got that. We got the render preview. The texture came in. Uh, However, you may notice that we got it doubling up, and that's because I've already worked on this before. But the point is when you do the import and you scale it up, don't forget to apply the rotation and scale. And actually, sometimes I deparent it so that it's own thing. But in this case, I'm not going to do that. So then you're going to come back over here and double check that your materials came in. But I've noticed if you re-import something, it doesn't copy it. It actually just reuses the correct texture. But like if you were working independently on this and then you go to import it, it might copy this. So just be on the lookout for the texture mapping to overlap or something weird if you're doing like a lot of complex imports. All right, so we go back to here, you can see that, principled, whatever, the shader doesn't matter. Your base color or diffuse needs to be your texture. It gets thrown in the alpha, but yeah, it doesn't seem to really like the actual importing progress. Like once it goes through max, this doesn't seem to really matter. And then finally, Crom is just its like own material, right? It doesn't really do anything. It's linked to an image texture, but there's no image texture uh linked here. And so then when you have a situation like this where you're like, oh, what's going on? You can open up the Moran's tool. You could go to that because these are separated by the material reference in your render, right? So see how material name is that and chassis is that. If I were to change this, it could be like Chroms, right? Well, there it just changed the name. So this is purely the material name. And so the material name, also notice the numbering convention. If you go to the chassis itself has multiple map indexes. Well, if you go to the your SL editor or your RPK that's been decompiled, or your RBD, and you look at your chassis, this used to have a third texture, and I've consolidated it. But the point is that it was pointing to these two textures. By the time I've exported it, imported it, and blah 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 blah, that third texture reference went away because it never got imported in the first place through the plugin. So that's why I'm saying you need to cross check your texture references in the render for the whatever you're working on. And so you can do that via this because like this should be 0 and 1, and you're going to see that that's what it's going to be when we're done. But this is the imported model, right? This is how it started. So you can already see this could be a potential problem if you're trying to work on something that already exists. So that's your one thing that you need to look out for. So you've scaled everything up, you have your materials set up, and you're pretty much ready to go. If you're going for a straight rep and you want to go right the max, or if you want to make a little bit of modifications, then be my guest. But essentially from here, you can treat this model as my quote modifications. And as you can see, I use the same mapping. If you actually go into here and edit, you can see the mapping is all set up, and that I didn't have to redo any of that other than the adding the engine bay, right, and the headlight stuff. So if you have like a model that's not quite right, like tubing or like an exhaust pipe or something that just has a little detail, this is perfect for that. But you can also do full-fledged modeling. Um, but finally, this is like the biggest deal, and I keep almost forgetting to talk about this. But when you import a model, I said there's potential problems that can happen, right? So you're going to do this, and you're going to go to Mesh Cleanup Tools and just do a merge by distance. As you can see, 1,025 vertices. Well, in reality, we just split it in half, because when you import an SCX, it has like double faces or whatever, or it has like back faces on it. So that's just a byproduct of how it ends up, or how the importer works. So then you can check that by like using the linked selection. So if you do this and then you try to do that, notice how it selected everything. That means you've got it fixed. But that's another thing to be on the lookout for, is double-faced imports. So I think I covered all the bases. You make sure you got the plugin, you import, you scale up 100, and then apply that scale, and you cross check it here, make sure your scales are 1.0, 1.0, and then you do your modifications, and we're going to talk about exporting next. All right, so now we're going to export this as a wavefront, and we're going to actually go from, let's restart this. We're going to go to File, Export Wavefront. Make sure your selection is done, and make sure all your scales are correct for the meshes. They're all 1.0. So just double check all that. Go to Export Wavefront. And from here, we're going to overwrite this object. Make sure it's selection only, and then there's no translation with your coordinate system. So Y forward is Y forward, and Z up is Z up, Z positive. And as you can see there, that's all making sense. For the scale, it's going to be 1.0, assuming you set it up correctly. For this check mark right here, this will only matter if you have a material that you made with a diffuse color that you don't want to set in 3ds Max. But regardless, the thing that matters the most is having material groups checked, and then path relative seems to make the setup for materials easier in 3ds Max. So here, that's all you got. So we're going to be overriding this. All this is set, and let's go. So now we're going to go over to Max. We're going to import the wavefront object. Once you've found and navigated to your object, you're gonna get this, and the plugin is Object to Max. I know this is in the SL Discord under downloads and modding tools. So make sure you have this wavefront importer set up in Max. So on this window in the plugin, you're going to deselect default, and then these are the groups of the from the material groups when you check that off in the exporter. Vertex scale should be 1.0, and then you're going to keep in mind the name of the file, and then you put in the material library, just like that. The base name's usually this first. Like if you forgot for some reason, it's going to be this first before the underscore. The object smooth groups, just make sure that the vertices and all the lines are like shaded smooth. So you should have that checked. And pretty much as you see, it should be fine. The center pivot, assuming you did all, again, you didn't make sure in Blender it was in the 0 origin. This should do the same thing. And yeah, make sure this is checked. I think by default, all these are really checked out in the plugin. But once you do it once in the plugin, it usually remembers it. And then you're going to get like the 2 commands. It's probably from the material, I believe. So as you can see, it brought in both. And then for, gosh, sometimes this is where it gets kind of annoying. Because I don't know, I know just enough in Max to get all the different parts I'm going to teach today done, but I am not, like, this is, all the modeling is going to be in Blender. So this is purely for functional to get it to SL. So activate all maps. It should show you the textured form here, but it doesn't. And actually, you can double check this with render. Let me go back to desktop. And you can see that the material's there. It came in. But if it didn't come in, if it doesn't show here, then I'll show you the little step for that. Also, make sure your names for the objects match how they came into Blender, right? So when we were in Blender, they came in as chassis and crown. So just make sure that matches. It helps with the texture mapping, and it just ensures that you're actually, doing the right thing. That you've linked them. All right. So then you can also double check your material. Here, you're going to go to material and you're going to pick from object. So I did the chassis. You can see it came in with the texture mapping. And here you can see you got the explicit map channel, and the map channel's 1, blah, 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 blah. All that's good. The reason it's not bringing in this map, sorry, is because the relative path, right? It doesn't know what the relative path is, but because I've done this before, I just have to reopen it from where I'm working. But this is why it wasn't showing in show all maps, right? And then you take that and then you reapply it. And then that should activate all maps. And then there you go. This is purely for verifying like what you're working on and then make sure the materials are actually there. But if you know how to do any more mapping and texturing and all that, be my guest. I have no freaking idea other than, again, this is purely functional. So anyway, we got our object names all set, and you want to make them what they reflect in the model. And if you're unsure, you can go to your original SCX and you can, let's use that Miran tool. I was talking, our Miran's tool, to double check that these are the names here. Now, it's not necessarily the order and the name of these don't matter. I do see a lot of models where people think that like it needs to be default whatever, or people just never rename the materials. And there's just like really weird naming conventions, but it doesn't really matter. It's going to more or so matter what your map index is and what's inside of SL Studio. So anyway, I digress. Let's go back out of here. And we're now going to make sure you have both objects or all. Do the control all in the viewport. And also verify your normals. Um, when I was messing with the geometry here, um, I didn't really make sure all my normals were correct at first. So then that caused a lot of problems. Like it'd be invisible in Max. Um, but you can easily debug that by using face orientation. So it should be all blue. And then like if you see this little show through of red, it just means that the faces are so close together it's bleeding through. So just make sure your normals are all good. But like if something's wrong, you're gonna know. You're gonna know something's wrong. But other than that, this looks ready to go. So now we're going to export. In this case, I can use full export, but or export selected is going to be more. So in this case, we're going to, make sure that you're on V4. We're going to overwrite this. When you do this, it's going to make a text file. But assuming you have it set up correctly inside the RPK, then you don't need to you don't need that text file. It could just be deleted. These are all going to be staying unchecked. If you want to, we're going to get to another section of the video where I show how to do the bones and all that, and we'll need this later. But the point is that this is pretty much ready to go. So this is where the Marantz tool is going to matter in SL Studio. So we just exported this to here. You can see I just did it. And it did not come with the name for the trim because I guess I deleted it. So you're going to go, once you're open here, you're going to click on the chassis or whatever you want that's paintable. And you're going to go into your render. You're going to find your render, which you can find via the CFG, or if you made the mod, you should know where your render is. But basically, the long story short is you should go into the car's CFG for the model and then search deformable, and it should point you to the render, which in this case is the 20. And then the textures, you can go in and search this, but I know that the 192 here is just like a basic texture for like a base color for the trim, and then this one's the actual like the chassis texture that I showed. And notice the order is this would be 0 and this would be 1, right? Because the array starts at 0. So then we're going to go back into the tool. And this is my shortfall of not knowing this tool that well. So the diffuse map is what you want as the paintable surface. And this needs to be set to mix TA sphere vat, specular sphere map, right? If you want it shiny. Yeah, that one. Mix TA specular sphere map. And we're going to do a mix map. The first one, again, is that 0 base texture, and then the map index for 1 will be the next one in line, right? So say you had a render that had a lot of different textures. Unfortunately, yeah, here's a good example right here. See how this has 3 renders? This would be 0, this one would be 1, this one would be 2. All right, so makes sense. So then you have that set up, and that should just work. And then for 1, this is just a color. Usually this comes in correctly, but I think because I've been playing around with this so many times with the different files. If you don't touch anything from the import and export it correctly, and you don't mess with it too much, these material types usually come in correctly. But again, I messed with it so much that, um, yeah. Anyway, color's gonna work. It's just gonna be whatever you define, and yeah, you can see it's like a shiny whatever color, and oh, material name. Yeah, that was the problem. Yeah, the names here are gonna be the material name. So when you import it, this is what it's gonna take. So yeah, and then you save. And yeah, there you go. Uh, you can see that the texture still shows through. We got the tail lights. We got the paint, which I made some god awful color, but yeah, there you go. You have a paintable, modified, textured chassis or part, whatever you want. So that's pretty much done. And somehow I magically got this texture right. Look at that. Nice. Well, Panda 3000 made this model, so they did a good job on setting up the CFG here. But yeah, hopefully that helps with that. So now the next tutorial is going to be on how to do the bone and animated parts that are linked to a like a part or inside of a CFG. So that's a little more technical, but we're going to get started with that.